Our teams have always been built around his needs. So it was kind of surprising to see, what was said. And even going back to, the reason we signed out is, we got rid of Jimmy, which I still think it was a mistake, just to make sure that, he needed the ball in his hands, and, that's a decision they made. Yeah, like I said, it is surprising, but I'm really focused on the guys that are here. The situation is weird, disappointing, borderline kind of disrespectful to all the guys that are out here, fighting for their lives. Some guys rely on, the team to be successful, to stay in the league and make money somehow. Because if you're on a winning team, you're always going to have a spot in the league just because you're on a winning team and you contributed. So, obviously we're a better team with him. We're not a better team without him, that's for sure. We are a better team with him. But like I said, it is surprising, but I'm focused on the guys that are here. We're trying to get better, trying to get on the same agenda. We know what we got to do, and every single day we got to attack it, as we're trying to get better every single day. But, we are a better team with him. So that's there's no question about it. But we still hope that, he changes his mind.
FYF Sportsman, it's Lamont. We are back with another podcast episode. Man, the NBA season is back. And man, we don't have a shortage of stories, man. Stories are all over the place. And the biggest story that has just been lingering through these NBA circuits, NBA treadmills, NBA conversations all summer long have revolved around Ben Simmons and the Philadelphia 76ers. We're going to get into all of that Ben Simmons news here in a second. Before we get started, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you haven't done so already. And we getting close to that 30K. The 30K, we right there knocking on the door. We're going to have a 30K special. Hopefully we can hit that 30K going into Sunday, because we got a epic video, hip hop video, hip hop debate coming up tomorrow that you guys don't want to miss. But man, as we talk about what's going on in the NBA right now, I mean, when we talk about the Philadelphia 76ers, we are close to the point of no return when it comes to Ben Simmons and the Philadelphia 76ers. When the all-star guard Ben Simmons, he asked for a trade going into the offseason, is now turned into him boycotting training camp. All right, now the fines are starting to amount. It was already reported that the Sixers didn't pay him $8 million that was owed to him by going to training camp, but now fines are starting to get excessive. It's getting $7,500 for missed practices, and then once he starts missing games, he's gonna be getting fined $227,000 per game that he misses. He's gonna be losing out on all of those game checks. All right, is Ben Simmons willing to give up all of that money to keep his stance on not playing for the 76ers, or will he ultimately relent? When we talk about Daryl Morey and what the Sixers organization has in store for this coming season, it sounds as if Daryl Morey still has hope that Ben Simmons is going to come back and play. Daryl Morey was recently quoted as stating, "I think there's a lot of hope." He said this Monday morning during the season opening news conference alongside Doc Rivers. He further went to state, "I would say I watched last night a player for the Green Bay Packers," and he gave the example with Aaron Rodgers lead his team to victory. And he was just alluding to the situation where a lot of people thought Aaron Rodgers had played his last game in Green Bay with some of the differences that he had with the Green Bay organization. But look at him now. He's back in a Green Bay uniform playing. He just talked about how every situation was different, but they have optimism that they can make it work with Ben Simmons in Philadelphia. Now, are the Sixers just trying to save face, get Ben Simmons on the court so they could potentially raise his trade value and make a trade for him? I mean, what is their trade, or do they truly believe that they can win a championship with Ben Simmons? We heard what Doc Rivers said at the end of the playoffs when they lost that Game 7 to the Atlanta Hawks. Now we've come back and we've heard Doc Rivers kind of recant those statements, and now he says they believe they can win a championship when Ben Simmons. The team has made efforts to contact him. Teammates were planning a trip to go out there. Ben Simmons said, "Don't waste your time." And right now, it just seems like Ben Simmons is going to give the Sixers no other choice but to trade him. And so now when we talk about potentially trading Ben Simmons, we hear all of these teams. We keep hearing different names involved. I mean, on some of the fanatical sports channels, you hear people saying, oh, if things don't go right with Russell Westbrook, the Lakers are going to trade for him and then they're going to get rid of Russell Westbrook. We hear Clippers out there. We hear all of these things. But what's the realistic situation? What teams realistically, when we're looking at the money involved, when we look at what the Sixers are asking for, we look at contracts, what teams can realistically make a trade for Ben Simmons? All right. So first thing we have to understand. First thing that we have to understand is we have to break down all of these NBA teams into tiers. All right. What teams have the best chance of getting them? And then at the bottom of the tiers, what teams absolutely have no chance of getting Ben Simmons? We kind of just have to separate the realistic possibilities from the fake news. We're going to eradicate all of that today. We first have to start off by indicating that at a minimum, because again, we have to always go to these salaries and then the salary cap in the NBA. At a minimum, a team is going to have to send out at least $26.5 million in salary for a Ben Simmons trade to work. All right, that's at a minimum. So that right there eradicates a number of teams. All right, but we're going to get to those teams that are going to get eradicated out of that conversation later. Right now, we're going to start with the teams that actually have a chance to make a trade right now for Ben Simmons. And not just make a trade for Ben Simmons, but also keep the Philadelphia 76ers in contention to win an NBA title. All right, number one team, and this is in tier 1. These are the tier 1 teams. We're talking about the Portland Trailblazers. Portland Trailblazers probably have the best opportunity to make a trade with the Philadelphia 76ers to get Ben Simmons. Now, look, first thing we're going to do is we're going to be realistic. Let's remove Damian Lillard from the situation. Portland Trailblazers are not trading Damian Lillard, so we're going to remove him from any trade talks. The prize asset in this potential trade will be CJ McCollum. McCollum, who's coming off 6 straight seasons of scoring at least 20 points per game. He's under contract due 23-24 season. Now, we know that Lillard has asked for upgrades on the roster, but is Simmons the right player? We know that Damian Lillard likes players of Ben Simmons' caliber, right? Just a couple years ago, Damian Lillard went to the organization and asked them to trade for a guy like Draymond Green. So we know he has an affinity for guys that play make and can defend at a high level. So I think Damian Lillard would absolutely love to play with a guy like Ben Simmons, even if it meant trading one of his best friends in CJ McCollum. Now, what do the Blazers have to make this work? Well, there's some things that they're going to have to get around. All right. Off the table is Damian Lillard's $39 million contract. That's his salary. They just take that off the board. They're not trading him. Other players who can't be traded, Norman Powell can't be traded. Cody Zeller, he has signing restrictions. He can't be traded. Same with Ben McLemore and Tony Snell. Those guys cannot get traded, so let's exclude them from this potential trade. Tradable contracts and the best pieces that you could possibly move are CJ, McCollum, Robert Covington, Yusuf Nurkic, and basically the rest of the roster. Even Larry Nance, who just came there, is even eligible to potentially be traded. Now, the problem with Robert Covington and Nurkic is they're on expiring deals. Those deals are up at the end of the year. Will the Sixers take on those contracts? Right? Will they sell out to try to win a chip this year if they could snag, let's say, a CJ and a Robert Covington? We don't know. But the prize in that trade will be CJ, who's signed through 2024, similar to Ben Simmons, who's also locked in long term as well. So the team with the best potential possibility to make a realistic trade is the Portland Trail Blazers, but will they pull the trigger? You know, it's Chauncey Billups. We know Chauncey Billups is a defensive guy. All right. Going into his tenure in Portland, does he want to start his tenure with a defensive anchor that will allow him to mold and set the defense, and set that defensive culture, that defensive mindset that we know he wants to instill in Portland? Is Ben Simmons that guy to do that? We don't know, but we got to see them pull the trigger on it. But we got the Portland Trail Blazers as at least the #1 overall favorite to make a trade for Ben Simmons. Other teams in contention in that tier 1 category, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. Cleveland Cavaliers have a few guys that can't be traded. Jared Allen, Kevin Pangos, Denzel Valentine, and Lauri Markkanen. Those guys cannot be touched. They can't be included in a Ben Simmons trade because of signing restrictions. But the Cleveland Cavaliers have a lot of first-round assets. They have a lot of first-round assets and trade exceptions. They have all their first-round picks. They have a $4.2 million and a $1.7 million trade exception that will absolutely help in getting this deal done. All right, then they have tradable contracts, some really good contracts. You got a Kevin Love. You have Ricky Rubio, Chetty Osman. Obviously, Mobley is untouchable. Garland, they said, is untouchable. But Colin Sexton, if you pair him with a Kevin Love, would the Sixers make that deal? All right, but Colin Sexton is up to be a restricted free agent next year. So are they willing to take that risk? All right, I don't know. I like Maxey over Colin Sexton, but Colin Sexton did average 24 points a game last year. So it's going to be hard to overlook his skill set and his ability to score the ball. But will it work with Joel Embiid and then bringing in Kevin Love at that power forward spot? I think that could help that Sixer team a lot with his versatility. So we got the Cleveland Cavaliers in that top tier because of the draft assets, because of the first round picks, because of the contracts and the players that they have. They are definitely in that conversation, and we've heard those talks. Next up, we have the Indiana Pacers. Now, it's hard to see Indiana making a blockbuster trade for Simmons. It's hard to see that, just considering the early part of the season. Rick Carlisle likes to evaluate his players. He doesn't like to do these early season trades before he has a chance to evaluate his players. So again, the likelihood of them making this type of trade extremely slim, but they do have the first round assets, the players, and the trade exceptions to make this work. They only have 2 players that can't be traded. That's TJ McCollum and Torrey Craig. So they have a boatload of players: Malcolm Brogdon, Sabonis, Miles Turner, Karis LeVert, TJ Warren. They have a boatload of players that can be included in this trade to make this deal work. But again, will they pull the trigger to do this deal? Unlikely with Rick Carlisle taking the helm for the Indiana Pacers right now. Then also in that top tier, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, it's unclear if the Timberwolves have the players. If they have the players to get a Simmons trade done, they may have to involve a third team. All right, and if they involve a third team, I'm almost positive that trade would include a D'Angelo Russell. All right, it would have to, because that's what the Sixers are looking for. But is it D'Angelo Russell? Is he pushing you into championship contention? I don't think so. You would have to get a lot of other pieces with that to get me to believe. Off the table, I don't believe Karl Anthony Towns is on the table in this particular deal. Just doesn't make sense. I think Anthony Edwards is also off the table. I think those 2 players are potentially untouchable unless you're really sending back a boatload of young talent to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Can't be traded. Jared Vanderbilt and Jordan McLaughlin, they cannot be traded. Minnesota does have the first round assets and the trade exceptions. So again, even though it's unlikely, they do have the assets and the players to make a deal happen with Malik Beasley, $14 million. You have Patrick Beverley's $14 million, and you have D'Angelo Russell's $30 million. They have the pieces, but again, I don't think a trade with Minnesota will send enough talent back to Philly to put them in the championship contention. The last team in that top tier I have is the San Antonio Spurs. I think the San Antonio Spurs are the wild card out of this group. All right, they have a combination of young players in DeJounte Murray and Derek White on team-friendly contracts, and then they also have Thaddeus Young, who can impact any playoff roster in the league. And they also have a boatload of first-round picks, including a future first-round pick from the Chicago Bulls. So they have a few players that can't be touched. Doug McDermott, Zach Collins, who they just signed from Portland, Bryn Forbes. So those guys can't be touched, but everybody else on this roster can be included in a Ben Simmons trade. All right, DeJounte Murray's $15 million. Maybe you compare that up with a Thaddeus Young. Those two contracts will be enough to make a Ben Simmons, but is that enough to push the Sixers into championship contention? You have Al Farouq Amino. He's making $10 million. Maybe you can throw his contract in to offset some of the money, but again, I don't think he's a guy that's going to be moving the needle. Lonnie Walker, he's kind of been tossed to the side on that San Antonio roster. All right, with all of the great guards like Devin Vassell, Derek White, and DeJounte Murray, he's kind of the odd man out. Do we see Lonnie Walker get moved in a deal to bring in another guy like Ben Simmons? I don't know. Again, the Spurs are the wild card. We know Popovich loves these types of players, but will they pull the trigger? Are they going to give up all of their young talent to bring in a Ben Simmons? Especially, and then you bring in a Ben Simmons with really no real structure on how you're going to build around him with that San Antonio team. You'll have to kind of start over from scratch. I don't know if that's something that they're going to be doing. And then also we had the Toronto Raptors in that top tier group, but the Toronto Raptors organization has already come out and said, please remove us from these Ben Simmons conversations and trade talks. So they've come out and been very open about the fact that they're not going to be making any trades for Ben Simmons, but they do have the trade pieces. So they do have the first round assets, the trade exceptions. They have the tradable contracts. They only have a few guys on the roster that they can't be traded, and those guys probably wouldn't be included in this type of trade because their contracts are too small with Gary Trent, Kareem Birch, Maya Chulik, and Isaac Bonga. So again, they have a lot of pieces that you can use. The most intriguing piece would be Patrick Siakam. That would be one of the most intriguing pieces. And then we've kind of heard those, clutch point rumor deals with Fred VanVleet being thrown into a deal, or partnering up with like a guy like OG Anunoby. I don't know. But again, the Raptors have taken themselves and removed themselves from the Ben Simmons trade talk. So again, I don't like to put them in there. Now we have our tier 2 teams. We have those tier 2 teams like the Atlanta Hawks, the Boston Celtics, Golden State Warriors, and the New Orleans Pelicans. All right. These are the teams that have the trade assets. The biggest questions are, does he fit on the roster? All right. When we look at the Atlanta Hawks, they have contracts of Bogan Bogdanovic, Danilo Gallinari, Cam Reddish, and DeAndre Hunter. But does it work with Trae Young and what you're trying to do? We've seen the struggles of Ben Simmons when he's playing with another big who kind of clogs the paint. All right. And so they still have a big that clogs the paint. I think that would kind of put that collision course on par with Ben Simmons. I don't think he wants to join another team when they have another big like Clint Capella who just stands in the paint. It kind of takes up takes up where he likes to dominate. So again, it's about the fit for all of these teams, but all of these teams have the money, they have the trade assets, they have the draft picks to get any deal done. The same with the Golden State Warriors. We heard a number of different deals getting thrown around by the Golden State Warriors, right? Right, but Joe Lacob and even a lot of people in the Golden State Warrior organization, they're kind of split at odds about a trade for Ben Simmons. Will it fit? We have Draymond Green already. All right, Joe Lacob quoted. He says, in some ways, it doesn't really fit what we're doing. And that's what he told the San Francisco Chronicle. All right, he makes a lot of money. He can finish games. And can he finish games? I don't know. He went on to say he's a very rare talent. It's just the problem is they have Draymond Green, and they're very similar. And so again, you don't want to bring in a guy where we see when you bring in two similar talents. This is going on in Philly right now. Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons needs that spacing to get to the rim and finish and be a playmaker. But Draymond's the playmaker, and he also needs that spacing to allow Steph and Klay to work. Will those two talents actually work? I think they could figure it out. I would think it would take over a year. I think it would take a lot of time to figure it out. Let's say maybe if they would have made this trade early in the summer and they would have had all summer to prepare. But right now, I think it's too late to pull that trade for the Golden State Warriors for Ben Simmons. But Lacob, even talking about this, actually ended up getting fined for his comments on Ben Simmons, due to the league tampering rules. We also have the Celtics. I spoke on the Celtics. All right, the Celtics, for their part, they're probably not going to trade Jaylen Brown. all right, for a Ben Simmons, and they can't move Marcus Smart because of the extension restrictions that he just signed, and those restrictions aren't going to get lifted till January 25th. So even though the Boston Celtics have contracts, the draft picks, and the trade exceptions to make it work, it's just unlikely that they're going to move any of the pieces that they already have. Because again, I don't think they want to part ways with Jaylen Brown. They've seen too much upside in his game, the chemistry that he's built with Jason Tatum. I think they want to build around that core group. If there's a way they can add a Ben Simmons to that core group without parting with any of their stars, but that's unlikely because the Sixers have already stated that they need a star back in return plus other assets. So let's go ahead and move on. We have that third tier of teams. That I talked about. All right, these are the teams that have young players. They have draft assets. They have veterans. All right. What they don't have is a major impact player. So some of the teams on this list, we got the Charlotte Hornets, we got the Dallas Mavericks, we got the Detroit Pistons, Houston Rockets, Memphis Grizzlies, Orlando Magic, Oklahoma City Thunder, and the Sacramento Kings. These are all teams with young players, young talent. They have the draft assets. All right. They have the cap space. They just lack an impact star player that you can get back in return. For example, Luka Doncic and Ben Simmons, that would be a very intriguing duo. But, unless you're actually looking to get Kristaps Porzingis back, the Mavs really have little on their roster that would, that the 76ers actually like. Right? When you bring in Porzingis, does that actually work when you already got Drummond and Embiid? Right? Does it actually work? All right. The Rockets check the box with the draft assets, but the $92 million owed to John Wall could come with a big warning label. So again, there's problems there. We got the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies, they put Dillon Brooks on the trade block. All right, they have Kyle Anderson. They have DeAnthony Melton. They own all of their first round picks. All right, they own all of their first round picks, and they have additional picks from Golden State and Utah. All right, but if you take, because again, we got to add realism to this. If you take Ja Morant out of the conversation and Jaren Jackson, two guys that I believe aren't on the trade block at all, then again, what you're sending back to Philly in that trade scenario, you're not giving them what they want. They want that impact player. You're just sending them young players and picks. That's not what they want. They're not in rebuilding mode. But again, a trade could happen, and a trade could happen there. I just don't think it's what the Sixers really want in return. So those teams that I just mentioned there, those are the teams, again, with some assets available, but the likelihood of them making a trade for Ben Simmons are extremely low because it's just not what the Sixers are looking for. They're not in a rebuild mode, so they don't want those young players. And they don't want expiring contracts or none of that. They're looking to compete right now. And so lastly, in that tier 4, all right, these are teams that they just don't have enough to even get in the conversation. All right, the two teams that I'm looking at are the New York Knicks and the Phoenix Suns. Now, the New York Knicks were rumored to be very intrigued by Ben Simmons, and it was rumored that they were talking with third and fourth teams to potentially make a blockbuster deal to see if they could pull it off. But the more you look at the Knicks roster and the players that they have available, some of the assets they have available, again, it's just not going to work. Okay, so they signed Julius Randle long-term. They're not going to part ways with him. But they just signed Evan Fournier. They just re-signed Derrick Rose or gave him an extension. Alec Burks, Kemba Walker, and Nerlens Noel. You have to take them off the board because they're not tradable right now because of trade restrictions. All right. And then with the Suns, they're obviously not trading Devin Booker or Chris Paul. All right. So that means they would literally have to gut their roster. That means Jay Crowder, Mikal Bridges, Dario Saric, Cameron Johnson, and they would have to gut those guys out and send it over to Philly to make any trade work for Ben Simmons. Are they willing to gut their roster a year after getting to the NBA Finals? I don't believe they are. So again, I don't think Phoenix is interested in gutting their roster to bring in a guy that's just going to put a big question mark over your team. They've already made the finals with this roster. I think they're set. They're not going to be making or pulling the trigger on any trades of this nature for a guy like Ben Simmons. And then lastly, in that tier 5 group, because we hear so much fake news circulating the internet, especially on YouTube, some of these channels and these unrealistic basketball talks. What we're going to do is my tier 5 group are the teams that absolutely have zero chance of trading for Ben Simmons. There's absolutely no chance at all that these teams make a trade for him. You have the Brooklyn Nets. Zero chance that they make a trade for him. Kevin Durant has already shut down any potential trade talks for Kyrie Irving. That's not happening. The Nets aren't entertaining it. They've already started training camp in San Diego. Those guys look like they're ready and prepared to accept any COVID regulations that happen to Kyrie Irving, if he needs to sit home games or not. I think they're set with what they have. Chicago Bulls, complete roster. They're out of the conversation. They just signed 2 big deals, DeMar DeRozan and Lonzo Ball. They filled out their roster, bringing it. They're done. They're out of the picture. Denver Nuggets, too many locked-in contracts, and they already shut down any potential trade talks that involve Jamal Murray for Ben Simmons. They kind of laughed at the idea. Clippers, completely out of the picture. Los Angeles Lakers, completely out of the picture. Miami Heat, completely out of the picture. Milwaukee Bucks, out of the picture. And the Jazz and the Wizards, both completely out of the picture for any trade for Ben Simmons. All right. Now, this group of teams, they've either depleted their pool of draft assets, right? Or they already have all-stars that fit better than Ben Simmons. This is why they're completely out of the picture. All right. So in other words, that just means absolutely no chance. I'm going to give you a quick example. So for example, with the Clippers, they're not trading Paul George. All right. He's really the only player with the contract, the star value that the Sixers would want, but they're not trading for Paul George. And so since the Clippers aren't giving up Paul George, outside of Paul George, the Clippers don't have the right combination of draft picks, right? The draft picks, the trade exceptions to send to Philly to make a deal work. You know, Philly's looking for that impact player. Clippers and a lot of these teams that I just mentioned, they just don't have enough to make it work. I mean, if you look at the Wizards, they have the star power in Bradley Beal, but the draft picks, they're lacking on draft picks. They're lacking on trade exceptions. It's going to be hard for them to really make it work and give the Sixers back everything that they want. And again, it depends on what team thinks they're getting more out of the trade. So a lot of teams are completely out of the picture. You have about 4 teams that I mentioned earlier in that tier 1 group that have the most realistic chance of making a trade for Ben Simmons. And ultimately what I believe is I think the team with the highest chance of getting Ben Simmons right now is going to be the Philadelphia 76ers. I believe they need to go above and beyond trying to repair this relationship. All right, when you look at this team and when you look at the successes that they've had with their young core, all right, when their young core first got together, which was called the process, all right, they overachieved with Coach Brown, with Brett Brown. They kind of overachieved. All right, they've been doing this for 4 years. They've, for the last 2 years, they've been in contention to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. All right, in 2020, unfortunate knee injury to Ben Simmons put them out the playoffs. They ended up getting swept by the Boston Celtics. And then last year, a series that they should have won against the Hawks, they had an epic meltdown. You're up 20 in 3 games. You're up 20 in 3 games against the Atlanta Hawks. You should win all of those games. It should have been a gentleman's sweep if you're able to hold on and win those games. Unfortunately, it was just a complete team meltdown. And unfortunately, the brunt of that team meltdown, the brunt of the blame is getting thrown at Ben Simmons because he just had some of the ugliest moments that we've seen in playoff history. Passing up open shots, passing up dunks, being extremely passive. All right. And the Atlanta Hawks did a great job of capitalizing that, exposing one of Ben Simmons' biggest flaws. All right. I think a lot of people on that Philly roster kind of went under the radar. Matisse Thybulle even spoke about this in an interview that he did with JJ Redick. He talked about how, look, man, there was a lot of us out there messing up, including himself. Missing free throws, bad fouls that cost him. And Matisse Thybulle talked about it. He said, I had the foul and missed the free throws that cost us the series. Nobody blamed him. Joel Embiid, a lot of turnovers over those last couple of games. Nobody blames. Highest paid player on the team, Tobias Harris, gets no blame. And I think when that playoff series ended, you know what? I think it would have been okay if the media would have threw blame at Ben Simmons. But immediately after that game, it felt that Doc Rivers and Joel Embiid threw all of the blame on Ben Simmons, and that kind of broke the locker room. That broke the whatever camaraderie they had left, if any. And now we're at an impasse with Ben Simmons and the Philadelphia 76ers. You guys, I want you guys to let me know, what do you think about this Ben Simmons dilemma? Where do you think Ben Simmons will end up? Will he get traded? Do you think Ben Simmons will sit out an entire year and miss out on all of that money? Right? I don't believe so. That's just too much money to absolutely pass up. I don't believe that Ben Simmons sits out that long. I just don't see any trades out there outside of the Portland Trail Blazers that could potentially give the Philadelphia 76ers exactly what they want. And then you can also give the Blazers what they want. But outside of that trade, I don't think there's any trade that significantly makes Philly better or keeps them at least right where they are in contention to win the Eastern Conference. And so again, it's a lot. It's a lot going on in the league. A lot going on with Ben Simmons. I can't wait to see how this unfolds. But we're gonna have the NBA season. Will be starting soon. We're gonna get back to our NBA watch party. So we're gonna get back to all of the watch parties. We're gonna be doing all of those things. Make sure you tune in. We're gonna be doing our super draft games for the NBA. So again, if you think you got the knowledge to win, we're going to be putting that super draft board up. Put your entries in early. Make sure you click the link, download the app, and get signed up to play so you can be involved in all of the games that we have as this NBA season starts to unfold. Again, make sure you guys spam up the comments. Let me know what you think about this situation. We'll be back with more sports and news later. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. Tomorrow's Sunday, October 3rd, man. We're doing our hip-hop debate, man. We're doing a hip-hop debate. Who is the GOAT? Who's the GOAT of hip-hop, man? All right, we started this conversation in another live stream. A lot of people were really passionate about it. I had my thoughts and opinions. A couple other people had their thoughts and opinions. All right, we're going to settle that debate. We're going to settle it. We're going to settle it tomorrow, man. So, man, if you want to tune in for that, make sure you check. Make sure all you got to do is hit the notification bell. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. All right, we drop notifications when we go live. There should be absolutely no reason why you miss when we drop a video here at FYF Sports. Hey, but it's FYF Sports, man. It's been another great podcast episode. We'll be back with more sports and news later. But until then, it's FYF Sports, and we out.